Continuing on the theme of academia, business efficiency has always been a very academic type of calculation that we make. How much output are we getting per input? How much money are we getting back for every dollar we put in? It's very academic and economists absolutely love it. But should we be asking that? Is that the right question? More on this in this week's Brant Rant. Remember, like, share, subscribe. Hi, Brant Cooper here. I'm fortunate I get to travel around the world speaking with startup founders, investors, ecosystem developers. I've learned a lot in my travels. I've got some stories, and I have some thinking that I love to share. Welcome to Brant's Rant. The idea of efficiency in business has also been very academic, and it's driven by primarily the definitions being things like the amount of output we get per input is a measure of efficiency, or financial efficiency is the amount of margin we get, the amount of profit we get for every dollar spent. And you really wonder if those metrics were chosen because they're the easiest to measure, whether they're confirming the biases of the people that actually want to run a more streamlined organization that produces output better, but it doesn't really take into account whether it's that output is serving its intended purpose, or it could be that it's really just a holdover from really the early manufacturing days where the efficiency of output actually was important for the viability of the business. And so the continuous improvement aspect of trying to get your factories, your manufacturing process more efficient, maybe made more sense than it does today. And the reason why it makes less sense today is because of, again, that increased complexity and uncertainty in the world. It means that, it's not sort of the technical risk aspect of it. It's not can we build it? We know we can build it. It's should we? And the manufacturing equivalent maybe is, we can make this more efficient, but should we? And so there's a question out there now in my mind is, as we've sort of focused the last 50 years on efficiency, really what I call efficiency for efficiency's sake. So efficiency for efficiency's sake is that we're looking at just the output numbers and we're not looking at the value creation part of it. So in the early days of lean startup, lean innovation, we used to talk about technical risk versus market risk. So it's not, can we build the product? Because we're pretty confident we can build the product. It's should we? Because will anybody want the product? And now I think we can make the same sort of argument for efficiency. It's not, can we make the process more efficient from a financial perspective or from an output perspective, but should we? Because we need to look at things like the complexity and the uncertainty and the value that whole process is supposed to be creating. So there's a couple of super recent examples. So if you look at pre-COVID, if you looked at whether we should build your business, should you build a redundant supply chain? It's going to cost you tens of millions of dollars, and yet your existing supply chain is super solid. From a pure efficiency point of view, in terms of measuring output per input or from financial metrics, the answer is no. You should not create a redundant supply chain because it's all pure overhead when looking at those particular metrics. Pandemic comes, boom, supply chain crushed. You can't produce your products because you have no redundant supply chain. Even the semiconductors. Should we, because we want to increase the efficiency of our manufacturing, should we outsource all of our chip manufacturing such that 70% comes from Taiwan? From a purely output-based efficiency or financial metrics perspective, you might very well say, yep, outsource it. suddenly supply crush, uh, uh, chips going to products overwhelmingly to an industry that then adversely affects the automobile industry cannot produce their cars because they can't get these chips. Efficiency. Uh, Power outage in Texas. Let's let's privatize the power industry. Let's deregulate, and let's believe the companies when they say that, or when the analysis says, when the academics say, oh well, the companies will be incentivized to create redundant and keep their redundant architecture, redundant facilities, infrastructure, and they will be incentivized to keep it modern and up to date because that's what's going to allow them to maximize their profits. Of course, the exact opposite happens. The cold comes, just absolutely crushes Texas infrastructure to the point that now, of course, uh, a similar thing that we saw in the pandemic, these private businesses that cut all of this for efficiency's sake now get federal bailouts. Dang, don't even get me going on the neo-libertarian Silicon Valley tech bro that says, like market efficiency, free markets. It's like we've incentivized all these businesses to do free market, where free market means the government will pick up the slack. Government will pick up the slack uh, for food, housing, all of these other things that keep workers alive because we're not going to pay them a living wage. We'll make up. We'll make up for when they spend their money on stock buybacks uh, instead of building redundant supply chains uh, or or maintaining their own manufacturing of silicon. And we'll bail them out when, due to their efficiency, their infrastructure fails in these catastrophic winter conditions. Free market. Okay. Uh, so completely the wrong incentives created. The more we get this flipped on its head, we create the absolutely wrong incentives with respect to entrepreneurialism, with respect to creativity. And of course, this all comes back to this ambidextrous system, which basically says that most companies need to be focused, a large majority, 70, 75, 80, 90, 95% of their operations focused on executing what they know in the market, increasing efficiency, back to that word. That's where the execution-minded people live. And yet, the forward-thinking company takes 5%, 10% of their company and goes off and does this exploration stuff. And the exploration stuff by that is meant innovation. And by innovation, some of them mean invention, not even innovation. But it's basically this tinkering around trying to find, the next big thing. And I've ranted on this part before too. They all use the same handful of stories: Blockbuster, Kodak, Nokia. This handful of stories that they say proves the need for this ambidextrous organization, and yet they cannot find examples of companies that split their companies in this arbitrary way. And what that turned out was disruptive innovation, breakthrough innovation in the explore side of the house. It doesn't happen. And it's so in the end, again, it's this academic principle that doesn't take what human beings do, what human beings naturally do, and tries to figure out how do you incentive behavior of these human beings in order to get the desired outcomes. Instead, the academics look at these sort of large, like, what do the institutions do? Even the institution of a startup, what does the business do? And let's create a model and a framework out of that. And man, you read these articles and they're like, they average, 3 or 4 or 5 syllables per word. I can't even get through them, to be honest. I'm not the smartest tool in the drawer, but I mean, give me a break. I can't even get through them. And you get to these articles and they're like, who are they written for? I mean, in the end, I'm not sure they are written for entrepreneurs or for businesses. I think that they're written for colleagues. I think that they're written for other academics. And so they don't need to be applicable. They just need to sound smart. And they need to be able to say, here's my 4 examples that I did this research on. And if you're an artist at this, you use fancy mathematical symbols to actually prove that what you're saying is true. But they all miss that fundamental scientific aspect, which is that it can be replicated, right? That your model actually applied will in the future have this result, and we've tried it, and here are the results, ergo the model is correct. None of that. Because they're not scientific. They're social sciences. And they're social sciences by very smart people whose purpose is to impress each other in the end. And I don't mean that as harsh as it sounds. I think that they really do want to positively affect the world and positively affect businesses. But I think it's a lack of self-awareness on their own part to believe that to be true. I think in the end, it's actually just to have something to talk about and write about. So out of all of that, what is it that we actually do need? Hey, thanks for listening to Brant's Rant. If we're choosing capitalism here as a society, then let's make it work for a better world. If you'd like to join me as we redefine capitalism for the 21st century, go to beatcoop.co/D4A. Also, if you have a pressing issue that you're facing in your innovation group, your product group, your startup, and want to join me on video, see the link below. Subscribe, like, see you next time.